Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about what I want out of the newest Metroid Prime game, Metroid Prime 4. We know now that it's being made by Namco Bandai and not Retro Studios. I can only hope that the game lives up to the Metroid name and is both a great game and, most importantly, a great Metroid Prime game. I hope that it takes what the first Metroid Prime games did so well and manages to build upon them, giving us exactly what we want while also providing something radically new, and building on what Nintendo has done with changing their game-making philosophy in recent years, specifically with games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. I think that Metroid Prime 4 should continue in this trend, but not exactly in the same ways. We want it to still be a Metroid game after all. So, I'm going to talk about what I think could make Metroid Prime 4 the best Metroid Prime game to date if done right. Now, I'm absolutely excited over the moon for a new Metroid game. In fact, of all the games that have been announced for the Switch ever, I look most forward to Metroid Prime 4, which is crazy to think about since we don't even have any real knowledge of the game, apart from a logo. So with that out of the way, I'm going to speculate and talk about what I want out of this new Metroid adventure. I'll be breaking it up into multiple parts so it can be a little more streamlined. Enjoy. I want the game world of Metroid Prime 4 to be enormous, like as large as something like Breath of the Wild or Skyrim. But given a Metroid game, I feel like it could have even more variety of environments. Imagine going to a place like Norfair or Meridia, the fire and water stages from Super Metroid, but like blown up times 10,000. Now, imagine all the new locations that they could create. Things like the Chozo Ruins, these technological wonders of the old planet Spygon era. Just imagine the variety that you could get with all this. I'd love to see Metroid Prime 4 really expand on what we've seen in previous Metroid games by really giving us these really lush organic worlds, larger than we've ever seen them before, really making you feel like you can get lost and really adding to the sense of isolation that the Metroid series has always had. I think this should be one enormous planet. This is a Metroid game we're talking about. This isn't Star Fox. We don't need too many on-rails shooting sections, in my opinion, although there could be some boss fights, perhaps near the end, that do require the use of Samus's gunship to fight it. I'm not entirely against that. But as far as the world of this new Metroid game goes, I want it to be big, and I want it to be big while still maintaining what makes a Metroid game a Metroid game. I think they should try to find a good middle ground between having a non-linear progression while also still keeping the items and power-ups that make Metroid what it is. Say, you could have like these big open sections in like the main parts of the overworld while simultaneously having the more corridor-esque environments that we're used to in Metroid games. Now, I also feel like this would really make the puzzles feel fresh and new. Metroid has always had really neat and unique puzzles, but just imagine, like Breath of the Wild, having multiple ways to solve these puzzles, and being a Metroid game on a different planet, no less. The physics in this game could be even more incredible. Imagine areas where you have to mess with the gravity to solve puzzles, going into your morph ball mode to try to like jump up 20-30 feet into the air. Like other Metroid games, I think that there should definitely be power-ups to make Samus more powerful. Like I said, I think that there should be a nice mix of non-linearity, being able to go where you want, whenever you want, while still having the option to get the power-ups you need to make those areas more manageable. Imagine scattered throughout the overworld, there are temporary upgrades that will allow you to go into the fire areas of Norfair, or perhaps the underwater caverns, temporarily being able to move about with them for the course of say 10, 15, 20 minutes depending on the longevity of the temporary power-up. That said, you could still go do the quests that you needed and fight the bosses to get the various suit in order to permanently be able to traverse the fire areas when you so choose. This would add a great deal of choice and variety to the gameplay and make it so that everybody had a slightly different experience while still having that sense of progression and isolation that the Metroid series is known for. And that leads me into my next section, bosses. For this new Metroid adventure, I want bosses. I want all the bosses, every boss that you could possibly imagine. Now, obviously, I think we need a good mix of some scripted bosses, say Ridley or Kraid, and also some, normal optional bosses. Imagine how incredible it would be to fight something like the Golem from Metroid Prime 3, or the giant robot from Metroid Prime 2, but just scattered throughout the overworld, like the planet, that you could just approach and fight it at your leisure. Sure, you might die the first few times you fight it, but by exploring and getting more power-ups, you become more powerful and be able to take it out easier. Of course, fighting these bosses would also give you temporary benefits, like the temporary power-up idea that I came up with earlier. By fighting some of these bosses, you might be able to gain some of those temporary power-ups. The point is, I want these bosses to be large-scale, larger than they've ever been before. I really want to feel small when I fight them, which will make defeating them feel all the more grander to me, at least. I want them to really recapture that feeling I had when I first played Metroid Prime and fought Ridley. I want to be able to fight like the giant rock monster from Metroid Prime, but like have it scattered throughout the overworld, similar to how it was with Breath of the Wild, although given Metroid, this should have even more variety to the number of bosses. Breath of the Wild I thought was great in how it had these sort of overworld monsters that acted sort of as boss-like enemies without really being bosses. I hope Metroid does the same and expands upon it. I think that the Metroid series has always had some of the best bosses ever, and if this is to be the ultimate Metroid Prime game, which I hope it is, it needs to really have all the best bosses it can have on the largest scale and also have great variety in how you fight them. There should also be multiple ways that you can take down these behemoths. Metroid Prime, Super Metroid did a great job of that by having challenging players who replay the game to defeat them as quickly as possible. Say it takes you a while and it's hard to beat one of these bosses the first time, but through experience and power-ups, it gets easier to fight some of these bosses, and who knows, they could even come in multiple variations too. Like, there will be like the beginner, middle, like throughout the game, the bosses will grow in size and strength along with Samus, and they'll do so at the same rate that you progress and get power-ups and advance through the story. I think that would really add to the world of this grand new Metroid game immensely. I'm almost at a loss for words. I want to see Ridley come back. I wouldn't mind seeing Kraid. I want to see a 3D Kraid. I tell you now. I just imagine how incredible that would be. Like, the size of half a planet. Like, with the Nintendo Switch having so much more firepower than any previous Nintendo console, there's no excuse for Nintendo and Namco Bandai to not do this. It would add so much to the world and make you so much the sense of danger and isolation that this new Metroid game should already be able to have. I want to see bosses galore in this new game. That's all I have to say. I realize I already talked about this a little bit in my world section, but I want to expand upon it as this is all interconnected in my opinion. For power-ups, I definitely want them to keep most of the same power-ups and have most of them, or at least the main ones, be permanent. I want the Varia suit power-up and the gravity suit power-up, the beam power-ups, and all that good stuff. The missile power-ups, the morph ball power-ups, but I want more than just that. I want some brand new power-ups, ones I haven't even thought of before. And like I said, I think it would be really cool to have certain temporary power-ups that say maybe they might have a finite number of ammo or something like that, or you know, you might have a power-up that can allow you to be in hotter places for higher certain amounts of time more often, or you know, cold places for certain amounts of time more often, like insular suits that, you know, by getting these you'll be able to last longer in certain environments, more than just the fire environments. I want this game to follow in Breath of the Wild's footsteps. Say you go to a more frigid environment and Samus's current suit can't always brave much against the cold, but by either fighting an overworld boss or solving a puzzle, you can acquire one of these temporary power-ups to use it for a finite amount of time in this cold environment until you're able to get the permanent suit power-up, which you can do at your own leisure. Now, you'll definitely want to get most of these power-ups as it will help you play the game better, especially near the end, but just that would add so much to the sense of the more non-linear nature to this game. Now, when I say non-linear, what I really mean is I don't think it needs to be Breath of the Wild non-linearity. I do think that as far as getting to the final boss, that should still happen at the very end, not from the very beginning. I think that they should find a middle ground, because unlike Zelda, where I feel like you can get away with being almost entirely non-linear just due to the game's structure, Metroid has a specific structure. Games like Metroid Prime and Super Metroid handle that flawlessly. Some of the more recent games, even though I love games like Metroid Prime 3, got a little too linear at moments, and don't even get me started on how linear Metroid Other M was. That barely had any Metroidness sense of isolation to it at all. But that's a totally different video, and I'm not gonna just be on the hate wagon for that game either, because frankly I don't think it's as bad as everyone says, but I just don't think it's a worthy Metroid game. But back to my point, I think there should be middle of the roads sense of linearity, and this should go with the power-ups that you get. You'll be able to get certain beams in this game that'll be able to be used throughout the entire game. You'll have like your ice beam, your plasma beam, there could be like a shadow beam for like fighting enemies that you can't fight normally, certain kinds of Metroids, brand new beams. But imagine like temporary beam power-ups too. Maybe they have like a finite amount of energy, or you can only use them for like 30 minutes or so before they wear out. Like, you could use these beams like that would power up your Samus's arm cannon in certain situations, and like just make it just uber powerful for a certain amount of time. It would be cool having a trade-off to some of this too, like say for some of these temporary beams, while your arm cannon and your hit, like you can obliterate most enemies in one hit, your damage proportions also go by faster. Like say you take much more damage while you have this amount of firepower, just to balance out the game just a little bit. I feel like that would be a really good way to sort of add balance to the game throughout from beginning to end. Same with Morph Ball. Like there could be like certain power-ups that allow the Morph Ball to like speed faster. Maybe certain power-ups that actually allow the Morph Ball to like gravitate for a limited period of time, like up into the air, like several feet. Just imagine like how cool this would be as far as just the sense of this, like being able to experiment in this world, whether it be Zebes or Talon 4 or an entirely new planet, I don't know, but just imagine how cool that would be. Just having these optional power-ups with the permanent power-ups. Like, you wouldn't need to get them, but it would just it gives you options. It gives every person who's playing a different experience, and I feel like that's what's going to make this game stand out amongst the rest if Nintendo and Namco get it right, is really adding that, just giving you that sense of pure Metroid isolation while also really adding a new twist to really catapult it into, you know, the 21st century. I mean, it's 2018. We need to switch things up a little bit, and I think this would be a great way to do that. For Metroid games, I think it's best when the story is minimal, subtle, and frankly optional. That's why I thought Metroid Prime was so perfect with how it did its story, is that it really added a sense of mystery, like you were a detective discovering what happened on this planet of Talon 4 by reading the ancient Chozo runes. Speaking of which, we've heard a lot about the Chozo in the Metroid franchise, but we've never seen much of them. Here's how I think the story should be done in Metroid Prime 4. First off, it should be relatively optional and non-linear and subtle. Second off, similar to how Breath of the Wild had memories, I think that they should bring back some of these Chozo runes, and by reading some of them, you might actually get to see flashbacks, not just like visual, like painting flashbacks like we saw in Metroid Samus Returns, which I think definitely tried to add some context to the Chozo history on SR388. I want to see like actual full-fledged grand cutscenes showing what Chozo life was like, showing the actual Chozo, actually getting to see them in these actual like cutscenes. Just imagine how amazing that would be. And of course they could be recorded to Samus's logbook and watched at any period. With this, I do think that they should bring in voice acting for some of the characters. Definitely not for Samus. Though I don't think it was as bad as most people said, the voice acting and the story as a whole in Metroid Other M were atrocious. Even if the gameplay and controls were, I thought, decent enough. So that is why, like I said, I want the story to be subtle and optional, and also add to the sense to the world in the sense of feeling the sense of isolation and detective work that I feel like games like Metroid Prime so perfectly capture, where you really slowly discover the truth of the world that you are on while exploring the world and exploring the different environments. Now, a character who might appear is the hunter Sylux, who appeared at the end of Metroid Prime 3 Corruption in the cutscene. If he appears in this game, perhaps he could be a rival to Samus, trying to find some hidden treasure, discovering things on his own time. Maybe, there would be, like Dark Samus, you might fight him a few times throughout the game. And if he's in it, obviously he should probably be voice acted. That said, I wanted to actually find good voice actors, like people that know what they're doing. Breath of the Wild had competent enough voice acting for sure, but if they really want to get more cinematic, they really need to up their ante and improve on the voiceovers for this game. That said, there should also be options from the get-go to turn the voice acting off and even play in the Japanese dub or whatever other language dubs they'll have. I think that having a subtle yet effective story that really delves into some of the elements of the Metroid lore that we haven't gotten much of could really add to this game as a whole. In conclusion, I absolutely can't wait for Metroid Prime 4. I just want to see what it is going to be like. And I want to play this game on my Nintendo Switch. I love Metroid. After Zelda, it's my second favorite series, and I want this game to be amazing. I can't wait for Metroid Prime 4, and that's why I wanted to do this video talking about what I think could make this the best possible game it could be. There are some ideas that I missed, and some ideas that maybe I haven't even thought of yet that I might touch on in a future video when we have more information regarding this game. But that's what I think would make this game incredible. I want a lush, organic, humongous world, like 10,000 gazillion times the size of Metroid Prime that they could have on the Switch. Like a perfect balance of non-linearity and progression, in variety to the puzzles, to the enemies that you fight, to the bosses, to everything. A subtle yet effective and interesting story. And of course, I want amazing music. It's not a Metroid game if it doesn't have incredible music by Kenji Yamamoto. I want a mix of old Metroid things. I'd love them to be orchestrated even at times, with a good mix of the techno stuff we got in Prime and some brand new styles to really make this the ultimate Metroid soundtrack. In short, I want Metroid Prime 4 to be as close to perfect as possible, and hopefully I hope that it ends up being the best Metroid Prime game to date. It'll be a tough act to follow, following in the footsteps of Retro Studios, as they made what I think is the quintessential 3D Metroid game the first time with Metroid Prime. But if they can do it, then I will be over the moon with the awesomeness that this brand new Metroid adventure could be. With that said, thank you so much for watching my video. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what you want out of the next Metroid game. I just hope it's a masterpiece. Let me know in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel. So I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.